The calm before the storm. The emerging empire. The galaxy had not seen a real war in decades. There were always small battles, pirate raids, border skirmishes, diplomatic tensions, but nothing that truly threatened humanity. The Terran Dominion, the ruling force of humanity, had become a legend. Stories of their past victories spread across the stars. Some alien species feared them, others admired them, but none dared to challenge them. That changed the day the unknown fleet appeared. It started as a simple radar signal, a faint blip on the outer edge of human space. A Terran scouting vessel, Vanguard 12, picked it up first. Captain Elias Grant, an experienced officer, leaned forward in his seat as his ship's AI analyzed the readings. "Strange," he muttered. "Not one of ours. Not one of theirs either." The theirs referred to the known alien empires, the Xilari, the Dreknar, the Vothan Consortium. Humans had fought them before. Humans had won before. But this was different. The signal was too large, too well organized, and it was moving fast. Grant ordered a long-range scan. The results came back almost instantly, and his blood ran cold. The blip wasn't a single ship. It was an armada. Hundreds of ships, maybe more, moving in perfect formation toward human space. Silent, unwavering, not broadcasting any identification codes. Grant activated the emergency channel. His voice was steady, but there was tension in it. "This is Vanguard 12 to Terran High Command. We have an unknown fleet approaching our borders. Size, undetermined, but massive. Speed, alarming. Intent, unknown." For a long moment, there was no reply. Then, a voice crackled through the speakers. "This is Admiral Callister. Confirm your last transmission." Grant hesitated for only a second before responding. "Sir, I don't think we are looking at a routine incursion. This is something else." Back on Terra Prime, the capital of humanity's empire, High Command received the data. The room was silent as the fleet's size became clear. It was larger than anything humanity had ever seen. Admiral Dane Callister, an old war veteran, stood at the center of the command hall, eyes fixed on the display. His officers whispered among themselves, unsure of what to make of it. "No known empire has the ability to launch a fleet of this size without us knowing," said General Astara, head of intelligence. "It's impossible." But the impossible was happening. A communication signal was sent to the unknown fleet. No response. Another was sent. Still nothing. Then, after hours of waiting, the fleet changed course. It was no longer heading toward empty space. It was heading straight for a human colony. The shadow on the horizon, on the distant colony world of Helios Prime, life was peaceful. The colony was a shining example of human expansion. A world with towering cities, massive trade hubs, and a strong planetary defense grid. It had never seen a true attack in over 50 years. That was about to change. Colonial Governor Renata Kale received the report first. She was in her office when her assistant rushed in, pale-faced. "Ma'am, you need to see this." The holographic screen flickered to life, showing grainy sensor readings. At first, she didn't understand. Then she did. Thousands of unknown warships were moving toward Helios Prime. Her breath caught in her throat. "Is this a joke?" "No, Mom." She turned to the military officer stationed at the colony, Commander Raylan Voss. "How long until they arrive?" Voss checked the latest readings. His expression darkened. "Less than 72 hours. Panic started to spread. People in government buildings whispered. Military officers scrambled to their stations. Civilians, unaware of what was happening, continued their daily lives. Kale knew that had to change. She activated the emergency broadcast system. A loud alarm rang across the colony. Screens on every street, every home, and every marketplace lit up with her image. "This is Governor Kale speaking. A possible threat is approaching Helios Prime. This is not a drill. Military personnel are to report to their stations immediately. Civilians follow standard evacuation procedures. The streets, once lively, turned chaotic. People ran to shelters. Ships began to launch, heading for spaceports, hoping to escape before the unknown fleet arrived. But deep down, Kale feared the truth. There was nowhere to run. The unseen enemy. Back in deep space, the Vanguard 12 watched as the fleet moved. Captain Grant had seen many things in his career. Battles, wars, the destruction of entire planets. But something about this fleet was different. "Sir," one of his officers whispered, "they're not just moving toward us. They're hunting us." Grant clenched his jaw. His ship was one of the fastest in the Terran fleet. But against an enemy like this, it wouldn't matter. The lights inside the ship flickered. A presence washed over them. Something unseen, something unknowable. Then, for the first time, the enemy spoke. A voice, deep and ancient, crackled over the comms. "Humanity, your legend ends now." Every officer on the bridge froze. And then, the enemy fleet opened fire. The enemy that shouldn't exist. The moment the enemy spoke, the Vanguard 12 systems flickered violently. Alarms blared as screens turned to static. The ship's eyes struggling to regain control. Captain Grant clenched his fists. "Reboot communications," he ordered. "We need to report this to High Command." Before he could finish, the enemy fleet opened fire. Beams of crackling energy lanced through the void, moving faster than any human ship had ever seen. The first blast tore through Vanguard 12's shields like paper. The second hit their engines. The ship lurched violently, throwing the crew against their seats. Sparks flew. Smoke filled the bridge. "They're too fast, sir," a lieutenant shouted. Grant gritted his teeth. "Emergency warp. Now." With a deafening roar, the damaged ship vanished into hyperspace, barely escaping the enemy's grasp. But as they fled, Grant saw something horrifying. The enemy wasn't just firing randomly. They were calculating, adapting, learning. And they were already heading deeper into human space. High Command's worst fear. On Terra Prime, Admiral Dane Callister stood in the war room, his eyes locked on the holographic display of the unknown fleet. Vanguard 12's distress signal had just arrived. It was worse than they imagined. "They spoke to us." General Astara's voice was low, almost disbelieving. "Yes," Callister said. "And they didn't hesitate to attack." A deep silence filled the room. Then one of the intelligence officers hesitated before speaking. "Sir, there's something else." The officer pressed a button, and a grainy, distorted image appeared on the main screen. It was a fragment of a long-lost data file. Something classified, something ancient. The shape of the enemy ships matched. Callister's eyes narrowed. Where did this come from? The officer hesitated. "From the old archives. It's a perfect match to an unidentified empire recorded 10,000 years ago." Astara frowned. "That's impossible. No empire lasts that long. Civilizations rise and fall. They should be extinct." "Then explain this," the officer said, "because this fleet shouldn't exist." For the first time in his career, Admiral Callister felt a chill creep up his spine. This was not a rogue alien empire. This was something far older, far deadlier. And it had returned. The fall of Helios Prime begins. On Helios Prime, planetary defenses powered up. The colony's defense grid, once thought impenetrable, was now humanity's first line of defense. Governor Kale watched as thousands of human warships mobilized, taking positions in orbit. Starfighters launched from carriers, forming tight squadrons. Battlecruisers adjusted their trajectories, locking onto enemy signals. Commander Voss stood at the command center, his voice steady but tense. "We hold the line," he told his officers. "No one gets through. Not while I'm breathing." Then, the sky darkened. The enemy fleet arrived. The first wave of alien warships broke through hyperspace like specters emerging from the void. Their hulls were unnatural, almost organic, yet forged from impossible metals. They emitted no standard signals, only a low, pulsating energy that sent shivers down every human soldier's spine. And then they attacked. Red beams of energy sliced through human warships, splitting them in half before they could even fire. Torpedoes detonated mid-space, turned against their owners by some unseen force. Humanity was losing. Fast. Governor Kale watched as her people screamed, scrambling for evacuation ships. The planetary shields flickered, seconds from failing. She knew the truth. Helios Prime was doomed. She turned to her comm officer. "Send one final message to Terra." The officer nodded, transmitting the desperate warning. Helios Prime is under attack. Enemy technology is beyond anything we have ever faced. We are being erased. If anyone receives this, tell them. Humanity is not alone in this galaxy, and we are no longer the strongest. As the message was sent, the shields collapsed, and the first enemy warship entered the atmosphere. First contact, and first blood. Helios Prime was burning. The sky, once a brilliant blue, had turned into a nightmare of fire and wreckage. The enemy ships had broken through the planetary defenses like they were nothing, ripping apart human warships, disintegrating defense platforms, and now descending upon the cityscapes below. Governor Renata Kale watched from the safety of the underground command center as explosions consumed the colony's outer districts. The holographic map showed red markers flooding the colony. Enemy forces had landed. Commander Rylan Voss stood beside her, jaw clenched. "They're not just attacking us. They're erasing us." Kale turned to him. "What do you mean?" Voss tapped a panel, pulling up disturbing footage. Human soldiers were vanishing. Not dying, not vaporized, just gone. Captured by a force unseen, pulled into darkness by energy tendrils before their bodies even hit the ground. Cal's blood ran cold. What are we fighting? The battle turns into a massacre. The 12th Terran Fleet, led by Admiral Garrett Lorne, was stationed near Helios Prime. They had received the distress signal and arrived just in time to see hell unfold. Lorne, a seasoned commander, had fought in dozens of conflicts. But this was a nightmare. "Bring all weapons online. Shields to maximum. We hold this line," he roared. The fleet opened fire. Hundreds of missiles, laser cannons, and railgun rounds streaked toward the enemy ships. And then they stopped. Right before impact, the enemy vessels pulsed with an eerie green-blue glow. Every human weapon froze mid-space, as if time itself had stopped. The next second, the weapons turned around. Admiral Lorne's eyes widened. Impossible. Humanity's own firepower was now heading straight back at them. Explosions tore through the 12th Fleet. Half their ships were gone in an instant. Lorne barely had time to react before his battleship was hit by its own railgun barrage. The shields shattered, and a massive explosion ripped through the hull. The Admiral's last words before his ship was consumed by fire. "They're playing with us. The ground war begins." With the orbital fleet shattered, Helios Prime was defenseless. The first wave of enemy foot soldiers emerged from their drop pods, towering figures wrapped in shadow-like armor, moving with inhuman precision. Their weapons didn't fire bullets. Instead, they unraveled human soldiers, tearing them apart molecule by molecule. Terran ground forces fought back. Elite battalions held defensive lines, tanks fired massive plasma rounds, and drone swarms rained death from above. But nothing worked. The enemy forces adapted. They moved too fast. Their weapons bent reality. Their armor absorbed human fire like a sponge drinking water. Commander Voss led his troops through the streets, using every tactic humanity had ever mastered. Guerrilla strikes, shock charges, EMP bombs. Nothing worked. The enemy didn't just kill. They harvested. Thousands of civilians vanished, pulled into the sky by unseen forces, their screams echoing in the night. For the first time in history, humanity was powerless. Governor Kale's final decision. Inside the underground command bunker, Kale knew there was only one option left. Helios Prime had to be destroyed. If the enemy was taking humans alive, they were doing it for a reason. And that reason was worse than death. She turned to Voss. Are the planetary reactors still intact? Voss hesitated. Yes. Cal's eyes darkened. Then we overload them. Voss's face paled. You're talking about a planetary self-destruct. You'll kill everyone still out there. They're already dead, Commander. Cal's voice was ice. This is the only way we deny them, whatever they're doing. Voss's hands clenched into fists, but he nodded. The order was given. The planet would burn before it became the enemy's trophy. The escape, and the final message. A single Terran stealth ship was still hidden beneath the colony's capital, a prototype vessel meant for deep space reconnaissance. It was the only ship left. Governor Kale, Commander Voss, and a handful of survivors boarded it. As they took off, the sky above them was a graveyard of burning ships. Cal's last transmission to Terra was short. Helios Prime is lost. Enemy technology is beyond anything we faced. We are not at war. We are being harvested. We need tow. The message cut out as the reactors detonated. From orbit, the last surviving humans watched as Helios Prime vanished in a wave of white-hot destruction. The enemy's final words. As the stealth ship escaped into hyperspace, a final transmission echoed across all Terran frequencies. A deep, ancient voice spoke, the same one from before. You run. You burn your own worlds to escape us. But it does not matter. You are already ours. The legend of humanity ends soon. The enemy fleet turned toward Earth. The real war had just begun. The fall of a human colony. The destruction of Helios Prime sent shockwaves across the Terran Dominion. Every major news channel, every military outpost, every colony received the final transmission from Governor Kale before the planet was wiped from existence. We are not at war. We are being harvested. For the first time in centuries, fear gripped humanity. The enemy had arrived, and nothing had stopped them. Now, they were coming for Earth. The Council's desperate response. On Terra Prime, the heart of human civilization, the High Command met in the War Council chamber. Admiral Dane Callister stood at the center of the holographic war table, surrounded by the most powerful leaders in human history, generals, presidents, intelligence directors, and fleet commanders. The room was silent as the recordings from Helios Prime played on repeat. They watched as soldiers were unraveled by enemy weapons. They saw thousands of civilians vanish into thin air. They heard the last words of Helios Prime's people, before the planet was lost forever. No one spoke. Then, President Elias Trent, the leader of the Terran Dominion, finally broke the silence. We just lost 40 million people. His voice was slow, deliberate, cold, wiped off the map in less than a day. No one argued. It was the truth. Callister exhaled. The question isn't whether we're at war. We are. The question is, how do we fight something that outmatches us in every way? The Council began shouting ideas. Some suggested immediate counterattacks. Others called for mass evacuations. A few, in hushed voices, even suggested surrender. Then, Intelligence Director Astara spoke. We don't even know who they are. The room fell silent again. She tapped the control panel on the war table. The holographic display changed, showing what little data they had on the enemy ships. They have no name, no official empire, no known territory. But our archives suggest they've existed for at least 10,000 years. A murmur of disbelief spread through the room. That's impossible. General Reinhardt scoffed. No empire lasts that long. Astara's gaze darkened. Unless they don't age. Unless they don't die. A heavy silence settled. Callister straightened. Then what do you propose? Astara's eyes gleamed with something dangerous. We find out what they want, before it's too late. A mission of no return. A plan was formed. Since direct combat had failed, humanity needed answers. The stealth ship that escaped Helios Prime, the Eclipse, was the only vessel that had survived contact with the enemy. Its crew, led by Commander Rylan Voss and Governor Kale, were now the only humans who had witnessed the enemy firsthand. Callister sent them a message. "We need intelligence. You're the only ones who can get it. Find out what they are. Find out where they came from. Find out what they want. And if possible, find a way to kill them." The Eclipse set a course toward the last known coordinates of the enemy mothership. Their mission was clear: infiltrate the enemy fleet, gather data on their origins, weapons, and leadership, discover their weakness, if they had one. It was a suicide mission. And yet, it was humanity's only hope, the enemy's dark purpose. As the Eclipse entered deep space, the enemy fleet continued its silent march toward Earth. They did not rush. They did not change course. They were certain of their victory. Within 1 week, they would arrive at the heart of humanity's empire. And then their plan would be complete. Inside the flagship of the unknown fleet, a figure watched. It was not human. Its body was wrapped in dark metallic plates, shifting like liquid. Its eyes glowed with cold intelligence. A lesser officer approached and kneeled. "The harvest has begun, my lord." The figure turned, its voice ancient, emotionless. "Good. The cycle continues. Soon, humanity will become part of us, as they always were meant to be." A dark energy pulsed through the fleet, and Earth's fate was sealed. The last stand of the human fleet. The Eclipse moved silently through the void, a shadow among stars. Commander Rylan Voss sat in the cockpit, staring at the massive fleet ahead, thousands of alien warships, drifting like silent predators. The enemy moved with calculated precision, their ships aligning into perfect formations without error. Not a single wasted movement. It was unnatural, mechanical, absolute. Governor Renata Kale stood behind him, arms crossed. "We're really doing this," she muttered. Voss exhaled slowly. No turning back now. The mission was simple. Get close. Gather intelligence. Find a weakness. The reality, it was suicide. But they had no choice. A living nightmare. As the Eclipse drifted closer, the enemy mothership came into view. It was colossal, larger than any Terran space station. Its surface was smooth and shifting, as if it were made of liquid metal. No visible engines, no bridge, no windows, only a pulsing core of dark energy at its center. Cal's voice was tight. "That thing isn't just a ship. It's a living organism." Voss' hands clenched. "Then let's hope it doesn't notice us." The stealth systems held. No alarms sounded. No ships moved toward them. They were invisible. For now. "Running scans," whispered Lieutenant Arden, their tech specialist. "This structure isn't just metal. It's organic. The whole thing is alive." Kale shuddered. "Can you get inside?" Arden hesitated, then nodded. "There's an entry point. A massive hangar, but something's off." Voss glanced at the screen. "What is it?" Arden swallowed hard. "The hangar is filled with people." Voss froze. "What?" Arden zoomed in. Human forms. Hundreds, thousands, suspended in glowing stasis fields. Cal's breath hitched. The survivors of Helios Prime. Voss clenched his jaw. They weren't killing them. They were taking them. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. This wasn't war. This was something worse. The harvesting process. The Eclipse edged closer. They needed answers. Inside the alien mothership, the horror became clearer. The stasis fields weren't just holding humans. They were changing them. Scanners detected molecular alterations, neural rewrites, DNA manipulation. Cal's hands trembled. "They're assimilating us." Voss' heart pounded. "Turning us into them." A voice suddenly echoed through the ship. Cold, hollow, ancient. Your species is incomplete. You will be perfected. Every screen on the Eclipse flickered to black. And then, the mothership woke up. The trap closes. The Eclipse's stealth systems failed instantly. An energy wave disabled every system. Lights flickered. Engines shut down. Gravity distorted. The ship lurched forward, pulled toward the mothership. "We're caught," Arden shouted. Voss slammed the controls, but nothing responded. "They're dragging us in." Kale grabbed a weapon. "We fight our way out." A deep hum vibrated through the ship. The walls darkened, as if something was pressing in. And then they heard footsteps. Something was coming for them. The final battle begins. Back in Terran space, Admiral Dane Callister stood aboard the TDS Warhammer, the flagship of the last great human fleet. In front of him, the enemy armada. Callister knew the truth. They weren't ready for this. But they had one shot. He opened a channel to the fleet. His voice was calm, steady. "We stand here as the last defense of our people. We may not survive this battle, but we will make them remember why humanity never kneels. We are Terrans, and we do not go quietly." A roar of determination filled the comms. 10,000 human warships surged forward. And then, the last stand of humanity began. Humanity's secret weapon. The Eclipse was dying. Metal groaned. Lights flickered. Gravity fluctuated, sending the crew tumbling. The ship was being dragged into the alien mothership, helpless against the overwhelming force. Commander Raylan Voss struggled to his feet, gripping the side of the cockpit as warning alarms blared. "We need power back," he shouted. Lieutenant Arden furiously worked at the controls. "They've overridden everything. I can't." The ship lurched violently, yanked deeper into the abyss of the enemy vessel. And then, they came. The walls of the Eclipse shifted, dark tendrils slithering through cracks, moving like living metal. A chilling hum echoed through the ship, a vibration that pressed into their skulls. Then the hatch burst open. They entered. 7-foot-tall figures, their bodies wrapped in black shifting armor, their faces hidden behind featureless masks. They didn't walk. They glided forward. Kale raised her weapon. Not today. She fired. Plasma bolts tore through the first figure. It didn't stop. The wound closed instantly. Cal's breath caught. "Oh no." Voss grabbed a grenade. "Try healing this." He hurled it forward. Boom. The explosion ripped through the corridor. Smoke filled the air. And then, a figure emerged from the flames, completely untouched. Arden's voice shook. "That's not possible." The creatures tilted their heads, studying them. Then, in perfect unison, they raised their hands. A pulse of dark energy surged forward. Voss and the crew screamed as their bodies were pulled apart. Then, everything went black. The last stand in space. In Terran space, the battle had begun. 10,000 human warships charged forward, weapons blazing. Missiles, railguns, plasma lances. The enemy fleet did not dodge. They simply absorbed the attacks. The Warhammer, Admiral Dane Callister's flagship, fired its main cannon, a blast powerful enough to split a moon. The enemy ship took the hit and kept moving. Callister's fists clenched. This wasn't a battle. This was slaughter. Human ships exploded by the hundreds. Fighters were torn apart before they could fire a single shot. Frigates vanished as reality itself bent around them. Then, the enemy struck back. A single pulse of energy rippled from the mothership, and half of the human fleet disappeared. Gone. No wreckage. No remains. Just erased. Callister's breath came in short gasps. His fleet, asterisk, his people, asterisk, were dying. All ships, fall back. I repeat. The transmission cut out. The bridge crew screamed as the Warhammer was hit. The flagship shattered apart. Admiral Dane Callister was gone. Inside the enemy mothership, Voss awoke to silence. He wasn't dead, but he wasn't whole either. He floated inside a dark chamber, his limbs frozen, his body weightless. Around him, he saw thousands of others. Humans, soldiers, civilians, all trapped in glowing stasis fields. He tried to scream, but no sound came. A voice spoke inside his head. You will be reborn. The weak flesh will fade. You will become more. Voss struggled, fought, but something was changing inside him. He could feel his mind shifting. The enemy wasn't just taking humans. They were turning them into something else. Something worse. And he was next. The Soul Breaker, humanity's last hope. In the depths of Terran High Command, a secret weapon had been activated. A project so dangerous, so catastrophic, that it had been locked away for decades. Its name, the Soul Breaker, a weapon capable of tearing apart space-time itself. A weapon that could erase entire star systems. A desperate final option. The last human survivors, led by General Astara, knew that Earth would not survive. But maybe, just maybe, they could take the enemy with them. Astara turned to her team. Set coordinates for the enemy mothership. Charge the weapon. An officer hesitated. Ma'am, if we fire this, we destroy everything, including ourselves. Astara's face was hard. Then we make it count. The final countdown began, and humanity prepared to pull the trigger on its own survival. The war is just beginning. The countdown for the Soul Breaker had begun. 0:59 seconds until detonation. The fate of humanity rested in the hands of General Astara. Earth was already lost. The enemy fleet was too strong. The last remaining Terran ships were fleeing, their captains knowing there was no victory here, only survival. But Astara refused to go quietly. She stood in the war room, watching the display. The Soul Breaker's core was reaching maximum charge, a weapon so powerful it would tear reality apart, erasing everything. Humanity, the enemy, the entire solar system. Her second-in-command turned to her. Ma'am, if we fire this. Astara's voice was cold. We take them with us. Then the alarm screamed. Incoming enemy ship. The entire war room froze as something punched through Earth's atmosphere. A small stealth craft. A single Terran ship. The Eclipse. Inside the enemy mothership. Rylan Voss was running out of time. He could feel it, the change creeping into his mind. The enemy's voice whispered inside his skull. Your species is incomplete. You will be perfected. He could feel his thoughts unraveling, twisting. He saw Kale, Arden, and the rest of the survivors, all trapped, all being rewritten. They were being turned. And then something snapped. A jolt of pure willpower. Voss' mind fought back. No, he roared, forcing the alien presence out. His vision cleared. His body was still trapped, but his mind was his own. And that was all he needed. His fingers twitched. A single command override on his wristband, and the ship's failsafe activated. The Eclipse, humanity's last stealth ship, self-destructed. A blinding explosion tore through the alien mothership. The stasis fields shattered, and suddenly, they were free. 0:30 seconds until detonation. The Eclipse burst from the wreckage, engines screaming. Voss was at the controls. Kale, Arden, and the others were barely conscious in the back. The enemy mothership behind them was collapsing, its structure imploding from within. But the rest of the fleet, still alive, and the Soul Breaker was about to fire. Cal's eyes fluttered open, weak but determined. We have to stop it. Voss gritted his teeth. How? That thing is automated. No human control. Arden, barely able to sit up, whispered. It listens to one thing. Voss frowned. What? Arden's lips curled into a grin. A bigger gun. 15 seconds until detonation. The Eclipse locked weapons on the Sol Breaker's core. Voss fired everything. Missiles, plasma bolts, railguns. The shots ripped through the structure, hitting just enough to disable it. 3 seconds. The core flickered. The countdown stopped. The Sol Breaker was offline. Silence. The war room on Earth erupted into shouts. The weapon is dead. Astora exhaled, shaking. What the hell just happened? A comm officer turned to her, stunned. Ma'am, it's the Eclipse. They survived. Astora's heart pounded. Survived. How? Then, another warning. Admiral, the enemy fleet. Everyone turned to the main screen. The enemy fleet was retreating. The enemy's final words. In deep space, the alien mothership, the heart of their fleet, was collapsing. The surviving enemy warships turned and vanished. One by one, their ships blinked into nothingness, slipping into the unknown. But before the last one disappeared, a final message echoed through every Terran channel. The deep, ancient voice returned. You delayed the inevitable. We will return. Then, silence. They were gone. Aftermath. A war not yet over. The battle was over. But no one was celebrating. Earth was in ruins. The Terran fleet was shattered. Helios Prime was gone. And the enemy, still out there, watching, waiting. Admiral Astora turned to the survivors of the Eclipse. Tell me, what did you see? What were they doing to us? Kel's face was pale. They weren't just invading. They were harvesting us. Voss swallowed hard. And they're not done. Astora's jaw clenched. Then we don't wait for them to come back. She turned to the war room, eyes blazing with fury. We find them first. And next time, we end them.